Hello, my name is Jacob Solis, and I am here today with the team. And today, we as a team will be talking about the advantages, disadvantages, and why it's actually good for you, or if it's not for your business, to relocate or invest into Japan. Now, we are here as business advisors, and we all have personal and expert experience with Japan. Our presentation will be around 15-20 minutes, and we will have questions at the end. So, to introduce my team, we have Beatriz de Vega, who will be talking about the culture of Japan, and we have Ishmael Bassam, who will be talking about the infrastructure, Andrew Liu, who will talk about the government regulations and policies, and I will be talking about the business etiquette and proper processing. So first I'm going to start off with Beatriz de Vega, and she's going to explain the Japanese culture in a brief presentation.
Thank you. Hello everybody, my name is Beatriz de Vega. I'm a business consultant and I have lived in Japan for over 4 years. My purpose here today is to talk to you a little bit about the culture of Japan. This includes the religion, the food, and some of society's conventions. Now let's move on to the religion of Japan. According to factsaboutjapan.com, there is freedom of religion in Japan. And there are two major religions. This is Shintoism and Buddhism. Now Shintoism, it's the belief that all living things in nature contain gods. Therefore they should all be respected equally. In Buddhism, it's concerned more with the soul and the afterlife. Now, these two religions, they're not really preached in Japan, and they're not a doctrine. It is more of a moral code, a way of living. They're almost indistinguishable from the social and cultural values of the country. Now, this being said, I'm going to talk to you about the food of Japan. According to InsideJapanTours.com, the Japanese people are really passionate and enthusiastic about food. They're really passionate and enthusiastic about food, and it's almost the sole reason why they travel abroad or within Japan to taste the food of other places. And something really curious about the Japanese people is that they find cooking to be an art. So they want to represent their art in a plate and present it in a well manner for other people to be satisfied. Now, comprised with the food in the Japanese culture, two really important ingredients are the rice and the fish. I guess you guys already know that. But according to JapanGuide.com, rice was once traded as a currency, and it has been a staple food for the Japanese people for over 2,000 years, and it still forms the basis of many dishes there. Also, the fish. Now, according to InsideJapanTours.com, the increased consumption of fish in Japan compared to Western countries, it is said to be a major factor of the relatively low rate of heart diseases in Japan. This is a very interesting fact because here in America, with obesity, I mean, there's things that need to be changed, you know. Now, the fish in Japan, it's usually eaten raw or slightly cooked, but it's really unusual to see it fried, and I think this is also a factor that counts on the low rate of heart disease in Japan. Well, this being said about the food, I'm going to move on to society's conventions. What is the Japanese way? Well, like in many other cultures, in every culture, there are manners that need to be taken into account for a foreigner to not come across as being disrespectful towards other people. In Japan, it is the same way. There are eating manners. In their case, there is the bowing, and finally taking the footwear off. Well, with eating manners, I'm going to tell you a little bit about, not all of them, but the ones that I found most important for people that want to go to Japan. So first, according to JapanGuide.com, when you finish your dish, you're showing respect to the person that cooked it for you and prepared it for you. So you might want to, before going to Japan, you might want to look up some of the food that you might enjoy, you know you're going to be enjoying the most, because you don't want to come across as being disrespectful and not finishing your dish. So that's something you may want to look at before going over there. Secondly, there's obviously no burping in public. This is really rude, and everybody around you will be a bit disgusted, honestly. And well, thirdly, there is no tipping in restaurants. If you are to tip someone, a server or a cook at a restaurant, they will awkwardly return your money and they will not accept it because, as I said, Japanese people, they find cooking to be an art, so they are happy to do the job they do. They just want to please everybody, and obviously since for them it's not free to buy the food, they have to give you a cost, but they don't want extra tipping, you know. Last, there is something that I find really, really important. Whenever you make a toast in Japan, you say kanpai. If you say chin chin, because this is something they say in France, if you say chin chin, you will be referring to male genitals. So that's something that you don't want to happen. That's something you really want to, so you say kanpai. Well, now let's move on to bowing. Bowing is really typical in Japan. If you go over there, you will see people bowing at each other. When you bow, like, the angle of the bowing will get bigger depending on who you're bowing to, depending on the respect that you have towards the other person. I find it to be really interesting, really respectful, and for the Japanese people, actually bowing, it's a sign of respect, greetings, and, well, principally respect towards the other person that you're saluting. Well, now, lastly, there's the footwear. For Japanese people, they find it really important when you go to their homes that you take your footwear off. It's a matter of cleanliness. It's nothing about like enshonli or anything. It's about cleanliness. And by you taking your shoes off, you're showing to them that you care about other people's belongings. So you might not want to wait for them to ask you to take your shoes off. You might want to do it yourself so that they know that you are respectful and you care for the family that you're going to visit or the business people that you're going to visit. Well, I have talked to you about the culture of Japan, including about the religion with Shintoism and Buddhism, the food with rice and fish, and finally I've talked to you about society's conventions, including the eating manners, bowing, and finally taking the footwear off. I would like to thank you all for listening to me, and right now I'm going to pass it on to Jacob to talk about business etiquette. Thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice. Hello, my name is Jacob Slees, as earlier stated, and I'm going to talk about business etiquette. I had a short personal stint in Japanese culture in the business world, so that's what makes me a little bit more knowledgeable. Here we have the traditional, just welcome or greeting in Japanese etiquette. It can be really confusing coming from America to just shipping or like going abroad and adapting. Okay, my first point is business attire for men. So, in the Japanese culture and business, they wear particularly dark suits through October through April, either navy or black. And throughout the summer, they wear like gray or like a lighter shade because it's hot. And there's like some tips where it's you can't wear like black shirt, a black tie, a white shirt, and a black suit because will think someone died, and I think a lot of people will think that there are certain haircuts you can and cannot have, or you're just not. It's not traditional. Like you can't have. I mean, it's not preferred if you have a shaved head or if you have a beard. There are exceptions when it comes to hair, though, because if you were in charge of technology or if you're in charge of like electronics or something like that, it's okay for you to have a ponytail for some reason. But I think that was interesting. They wear regular dress shoes and everything like that. It's basically just a suit, but it's just the timings that they wear certain colors, and they have like a process for it. And for women, there's no jewelry, but they do like to be very fashionable when they're in the workplace. However, they cannot be as flashy. So you'll see them wear like a lot of designer names, and I looked this up, and there's just tons of pictures of Japanese women in office like wearing Gucci and Versace and everything like that, and just because they're not able to be as flashy, they like to feel as good and wear as much as they can, like take pride into that, which I think a lot of women do in any workforce. So there's that. They cannot have like their hair down most of the time, especially if they're in a business meeting. You always want to have your hair either short or tied back, and I thought that was interesting. And lastly, they cannot wear like high heels or short skirts, but it's just different because in America it's kind of like, well, but and then next, my next point is business cards, which it's not the the biggest aspect in business typically, especially now we have so many different forms of communication through email and just just an email or like a text or a call or something like that, a voicemail, and business cards are still very traditional and very important in Japan. Like your business will not thrive unless you have business cards, or you're not going to spread or grow, because they are like a representation of who you are, really. So, like, if you go on a business trip for a week, you're expected to have at least 100 business cards on you. And for every small meeting, you have like 3 to 4 that you're going to hand out. For every, like, there's certain amounts that you take based on the meeting size, and you give it to the important person. And when you receive a business card, you always receive it with like the same hospitality that you would receive an executive, like no matter what it is, because it's just a sign of respect to not only that person, but the business as itself. And here I have a Japanese business card. So the front side will probably be, if it's with an English deal or a foreign deal, it'll be that language, and then on the back will be Japanese, as shown as a sign of respect for the foreign country. So we have a foreign language here. It's always company name, person's name, and contact information. And it's always in the same format on the back, because they don't believe in having to change the whole thing on the back just because it's in a different language. They want to be able to show that they can still be the same and just be in a different language. And the presentation of business cards is very important. You never want to slide it on the table. I know it looks really cool to just slide it on the table sometimes, or just throw it out to someone. But in Japan, you will not be taking kindly, they'll frown upon it. You're supposed to have both hands on it, and in the picture, have both hands on it, and when you bow and you face it forward a little bit. And you always have it on the Japanese side, which is weird because sometimes it'll be the back, but you always have it on that side to show that that's where they're from. So, yeah. And business meetings are different, but the mannerisms are or should be the same to American culture, as to where if you're late, you have to call an hour before. Even if you think you're gonna be slightly late, 5 or 10 minutes, you have to call an hour before at least. And every meeting, you're supposed to call at least an hour or 2 prior to that meeting, just to confirm that you're going to be there, for everything, any meeting. It's always very proper to take notes. That's a very big thing, because not only does that show that you're paying attention, but that means that you want to remember this. You always want to make sure that you have an exact agenda, because Japanese companies and businesses are strictly on very tight schedules most of the time, and you don't want to waste anyone's time by just extending it when it could have been done earlier, or when it could have done there's a more efficient way. That's also a better way to promote what your business would be doing, and if you're more efficient in a meeting presenting yourself, you'd be more efficient in a meeting. And so this is what I covered in my business etiquette. I covered the attire, the business meetings, and business cards. And now I'd like to pass it over to Ishmael Bazam, and he can talk about the infrastructure. So thank you for listening to my presentation on business etiquette.
So, hi everybody. So as Andrew said, I Ismail Bassam, and I used to live in Japan for 5 years, so I'm pretty familiar with this country. And today I'm going to talk to you about the infrastructure of this country. So I will talk about the road and public transportation system. I will also talk about the maritime and air system, and finally I will talk about the power of the industry of this country. So, about the road and public transportation of this country, you have to know that Japan have an extensive and modern road network. It is about 760,000 miles of highway, which in 536,000 miles are paved, according to JG. So it is also about 4,000 miles of expressway, and always in order to make the transportation easier inside the country, the government launched a new project that will have as a purpose to create a new expressway that will link Tokyo to Kobe, another big city in Japan, via Nagoya. And you also have to know that in Japan, compared to the other countries in the world, it is really expensive to have a car. It's really expensive to have a car because of the tools and the taxes. It's in the general way, the transportation is expensive in Japan, so you will prefer use the public transportation. And actually, this is the reason why Japanese use less energy per person than the other country in the world, because a lot of them use the highway. Actually, the highway is the major mean of transportation used in Japan. There is about 12 companies complete in the regional and local transportation market. There is also some, they call that 250 high-speed Shinkansen train. So there are some really fast trains within the big city of Japan, and so make you able to travel really fast between those big cities. So, and it is according to the National Encyclopedia.com. So now let's talk about the maritime and air system. So, as a country surrounded by water, Japan has a really developed maritime system. So they have many harbors in almost all the principal cities that you find in Japan, like Tokyo, Osaka, Yokohama. And they need this because the Japanese soil is actually really poor. And so they can't find all the raw material that they need for their industry in their country, so they have to import a lot. So that's the reason why they have a such developing maritime system. And it is about a fleet of about 662 ships for a capacity of 13,000 tons. So it is a lot. And they also have 171 airports in all the territory, and 4 of them are international. The airport of Kageyoshi, Kansai, Tokyo, and Osaka, according to the National Encyclopedia.com. So basically, if you want to do business in Japan, but not only in one city, not only in Tokyo, but you want to be able to be in all the different cities in Japan, you will be able to do this really easily, because you will be able to travel all around the Japan in only some couple of hours because of all the airports that they have in their country. So finally, let's talk about the industry power. So you have to know that only 5% of the nation power is generated by the private sphere. So that means that the government used to control a lot. But some new policy of deregulation have been established. And so we do predict an increasement of this rate in the following years. And also about the electricity that the Japan produces is from 4 derived sources. So the main sources is the terminal one with about 52%. So it is like the oil or the liquid gases. And the second one is the nuclear one with 32%. Then you have the hydro one with 9%, and all the non-conventional energy like the sun or the wind only represent 2% of their source of energy. But with the price of the fuel will never stop growing, Japan want to decrease their uses of this kind of energy in order to increase the nuclear one, because the nuclear one will be more cheaper for them and make them able to be more efficient. So in the overall, I talked to you a little bit about the infrastructure of Japan across the road and public transportation system. I also talk about the maritime and air system, and I end with the power of their industry. So thank you for listening to me, and I will pass off to Andrew to talk to you about the government restriction.
Thanks, Ishmael. Hi, I'm Andrew. I've been a legal consultant in Japan for the past 5 years, and today I'm going to give you guys a broad overview of the legal framework and government regulations in which business is conducted in Japan. So first, I'll give a brief overview and history of Japan's government. Secondly, I'll talk about the regulations of foreign investment in Japan, and then I'll detail about the taxation and tax systems used in Japan. So first, the history overview. According to Cornell University article, Japan has been categorized as a constitutional monarchy with a form of parliamentary government since 1947. And the current emperor for Japan right now is Emperor Akihito, who is also the chief of state, and he's been the emperor since 1989. However, the emperor actually doesn't have much power related to government. It's actually, the cabinet actually exercises executive power because they're responsible for the Diet, the National Diet, which is a bicameral parliamentary, which consists of the Prime Minister and other ministries of state. And they determine the ministries of state by nationwide votes, and then the Prime Minister will then be voted within the Diet society. And currently the Prime Minister is Shinzo Abe, which was in a picture in the last slide. And this is good because Japan has a very similar government to US because of its constitution, as well as the Great Britain and Canada with its parliament type of government. So because of this, it's easy for businesses to relate to Japan's government issues or government law because many countries can relate to their type of government. So moving on to regulations of foreign investments, there are very few restrictions actually regarding foreign investments in Japan. This is because of the Foreign Exchange and Foreign Trade Act that was passed and that was specifically designed to lessen the amount of restrictions in Japan. And first, it restricts no export balancing requirements, which pretty much means there are no trade restrictions for foreign firms that are trying to set up and establish in Japan, which makes it easier for them to establish a place in Japan. But for as restrictions go, so 3 months before, you have to notify the Ministry of Finance if you have a business that is in a certain restricted sector, which can be agriculture, fishing, aviation, basically major types of companies. But if you're not doing a business in a restricted sector, you can just notify the Ministry of Finance 15 days after you actually set up. So that's nice. And then for the Foreign Trade and Exchange Act, it's very specific. It deals with all kinds of foreign investment, whether it's share or asset acquisitions, which is really helpful as it is very detailed and it can go to all different kinds. There's currently Invest Japan, which are offices that help with the foreign investment process, which helps a lot. And there are also very little exchange control requirements, which means foreign companies can freely engage in cross-border lending and borrowing, which results in a stronger economy. So I'll talk about the tax system in Japan. There are two types of taxes. There are national and local taxes. And for the average, the national corporation tax is determined to be around 30%, which is fairly fair. For smaller corporations, though, however, for companies that are capitalized at less than 100 million yen, the first 8 million yen they receive in income will only be a 22% tax rate. So that really help starting businesses grow in Japan. And for local taxes, there's municipalities, which are cities and villages, and prefectures, which are secondary organizations. And this goes into effect with the national effective corporate tax. And normally there's just a normal inhabitant tax, but for the prefecture taxes, there are more specific ones like tobacco taxes and golf course utilization taxes, which also go into effect. So when you add up all these together, Japan's national government, national effective corporate tax is over 2%, which is not very low, but comparing it to other countries like USA and Spain that are also highly industrialized, Japan's corporate tax rate's pretty good considering how it's one of the top 3 industrialized countries in the world. So to recap on what I talked about today, I talked about a brief overview and history of Japan's government, the regulations of foreign investment in Japan, and also the tax system in Japan. So to wrap up our presentation, Beatrice talked about the diversity and tradition in cultures, Japanese cultures. Jacob talked about, give us some insight on business etiquette and how diligent Japanese men and women are in the workforce. And also, Ishmael talked about infrastructure and how easy it is to travel with their road systems, air flights, and public transportation. And I also talked about how the privileges of Japanese government with the incentives of foreign investment laws and the fair and effective corporate tax rates. And with all this in mind, we'd like to recommend that you consider doing business with Japan, as we all believe that it will be a profitable decision based on the aspects we previously discussed. I'd like to thank you for listening to our presentation. If there are any questions, we'd like to take them now.